What would you do if you discovered your husband had booked a suite at a luxury resort? Not for a romantic surprise getaway with you, but for a weekend with his coworker. Most women would cry, throw dishes, or, at most, toss his clothes out the window. Me? Well, let's just say I got a little more creative. Hi, I'm Rebecca Morgan, and this is the story of how I booked the presidential suite right next to my husband's secret honeymoon, hired a country band to play that famous Carrie Underwood revenge song on repeat against their wall, and accidentally went viral on the internet. What started as an impulsive act of vengeance ended up revealing secrets I wasn't prepared to discover, connecting me with an unlikely group of allies, and, ironically, freeing me from a marriage that had been stuck on spin cycle for years, making a lot of noise but going absolutely nowhere. Curious how it all ended? Well, the best part of the story wasn't even the look of sheer panic on his face when he saw me on the balcony next door. Would you believe I discovered my husband's affair because of a streaming algorithm? My life turned upside down on an ordinary Tuesday when I opened Netflix on our shared profile. You know, modern couple stuff, saving even the $15 for an extra monthly subscription. That's when I saw that treacherous suggestion section staring back at me. Because you watched How to Plan a Romantic Getaway to the Florida Keys. Problem: I had never watched that documentary in my entire life, and Richard had sworn he was spending the weekend fishing with the guys in upstate New York, not at some paradise resort for two. I sat there staring at the screen like I'd just watched a cockroach do the cha-cha, paralyzed and slightly fascinated by the sheer audacity of it all. Richard and I had been together for 8 years. We had a mortgaged condo in a quiet neighborhood, a ridiculously impractical collection of decorative plates we never used, and a golden retriever named Captain, who drooled more than a politician at a barbecue. People with mortgage payments and dogs named after superheroes don't cheat, right? Right? The question hammered in my mind as I closed the laptop, pretending I hadn't seen anything. After all, it must just be an algorithm error, right? The same kind of error that makes you receive diaper ads after merely thinking about having kids. Must be some mistake, I thought, while my brain did mental gymnastics worthy of a Cirque du Soleil contortionist to justify the unjustifiable. I texted my friend Jessica, "Have you ever gotten a recommendation for something you never watched?" She responded almost instantly. Only when my ex used my profile to watch documentaries about serial killers that he loved. Why? I filed that information away like tucking a $50 bill in your bra. You know you'll need it later, but you'd rather not think about it right now. Richard came home that evening, talking about the fishing trip that weekend, and I smiled like a morning show host, teeth on full display and eyes completely dead inside. On Wednesday, the universe decided one clue wasn't enough and opted to slap me across the face with a boxing glove. While checking my emails on the packed subway, wedged between a lady with grocery bags and a guy blasting music without headphones, I received a message from my nutritionist, Dr. Claudia Martinez. "Rebecca, here are the dietary recommendations for your stay at Crystal Waters Resort that you requested. Enjoy your weekend." Resort? What resort? I almost dropped my phone on the head of the music guy, which would have been an act of poetic justice considering the deafening volume. I called Dr. Martinez as soon as I got off the subway, hiding in the emergency stairwell of the office building where I work as an administrative analyst, or, as I like to call it, an Excel slave with dental insurance. "Your husband contacted me, saying you two were going to spend a romantic weekend away, and he wanted to surprise you with a menu that wouldn't interfere with your lactose intolerance," she explained cheerfully. Here's the most painful detail. Richard had never cared about my lactose intolerance in 8 years of marriage. He regularly offered me ice cream after dinner, as if my digestive system would miraculously cure itself through osmosis. "Maybe it's an early birthday surprise," I mentioned to Jessica while we grabbed coffee at the 24-hour diner that witnesses more drama than a therapist's office. She almost spit out her cappuccino. Your birthday is 6 months away, and your anniversary was 2 weeks ago when he gave you a blender. I looked at my friend with that expression only women understand. A mix of, I want to cry with I want to kill someone, seasoned with a pinch of, how am I this stupid? Can you imagine someone receiving a blender as an anniversary gift? It's like getting a broom on Valentine's Day, or an iron for Christmas. The next day, while waiting for the building elevator, the one that always stops on every floor except yours when you're running late, I received a notification from the health app we shared to monitor our fitness activities. Congratulations! Richard has completed 7 ballroom dance classes. Next goal, Argentine tango. I stared at the screen as if it had just informed me that aliens were invading Central Park. Ballroom dancing. The same man who refused to dance at our wedding, claiming he had 2 left feet and 0 sense of rhythm. I instantly remembered our wedding reception when I begged him to dance to At Last by Etta James, because there's no proper American wedding without a first dance, and he refused, preferring to stay at the bar discussing the Yankees' chances. Honey, you know I have the motor coordination of a drunk giraffe, he'd said, gently pushing me to dance with my father instead. Now, apparently, he'd transformed into Fred Astaire, ready to sweep across the dance floor. With whom? The question blinked in my mind, like a cheap motel sign on the side of the highway. I need a professional opinion, I told my sister that night over the phone. She'd graduated with a psychology degree 6 months ago and already considered herself Dr. Phil in heels, never missing an opportunity to analyze my marriage. I showed her all the strange coincidences while she adjusted her thick-framed glasses that she bought after starting her practice. Rebecca, you're practicing denial at an Olympic level. If this were a competition, you'd have won gold, silver, bronze, and still taken home the participation trophy. Typical of her. The subtlety of a bulldozer demolishing a concrete wall. But what if she was right? The final confirmation came Friday, in the most idiotic way possible. I forgot my phone at home, and since I needed to call an Uber for a meeting downtown, I asked to borrow Richard's before he left for work. Sure, babe. Password's the same as always, he said, handing me the device without hesitation. That confidence should have reassured me, but it only made me more suspicious. Nobody who's cheating is that relaxed unless they're very stupid or very confident. In Richard's case, probably both. The most dangerous combination that exists, right after mixing margaritas with antibiotics. When I opened the rideshare app, the message appeared that transformed suspicion into certainty. Your trip to Crystal Waters Resort is scheduled for Friday at 3 p.m. Would you like to see details of the reservation for 2 people? 2 people? The phone nearly slipped from my sweaty hands. Captain looked at me with that expression of, I may not understand English, but I know when there's trouble. I felt a mixture of nausea and rage so intense I had to sit on the couch. How did he have the audacity? And how was I so blind? The answer to the second question probably lay in the fact that I'd believed poker night with the guys was actually about cards, and not about booking romantic getaways with his mistress. In that moment, something changed inside me. It was like a switch had been flipped, transforming understanding doormat Rebecca into detective and vengeful Rebecca. I canceled the meeting, inventing a stomach virus, which wasn't a lie since my stomach was churning like I'd swallowed a blender. Oh, the irony. I spent the entire morning investigating Crystal Waters Resort in the Florida Keys. Honeymoon suite, private jacuzzi, breakfast included. Everything booked on the corporate credit card, the one I didn't have access to because it's just work expenses, honey. Super boring stuff. Super boring indeed was discovering your husband was spending company money on another woman. When Richard announced Thursday evening that he was packing his bags for the fishing trip, I had to restrain the urge to throw that blender at his head. Going fishing for what, darling? Mermaids in the Keys? Almost escaped my mouth, But instead I smiled like someone who'd just won the lottery while internally planning the apocalypse. I realized in that moment I had two options: confront him directly, the classic "I checked your phone, you bastard" approach, or, well, something more creative. Have you ever watched those revenge videos on TikTok? They exist for a reason. Nobody wants to be the pathetic woman in the story, the one who cried and begged for explanations. A man only admits what he's done when he has absolutely no other way out. I heard that pearl of wisdom while waiting for the elevator. The voice belonged to Teresa Livingston, my 50-year-old neighbor, with impeccably highlighted auburn hair and an enviable collection of scarves that I secretly suspected were knockoffs from the discount district. She looked at me with those eyes that had seen more betrayals than a family lawyer. "Sweetheart, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Thin walls. You know how it is." Actually, I didn't know the walls were that thin, which made me reconsider all our arguments from the past few years. "If you're going to get back at a cheating scumbag, do it right," Teresa continued, pressing the third-floor button with a perfectly manicured red nail. "My nephew has a band that plays weddings, graduations, and well-planned marital revenge scenarios." She winked as if passing me the secret recipe for perfect brownies. It was in that moment, somewhere between the 7th and 6th floors, that the real plan began to take shape. Who needs direct confrontation when you can have a country band playing that Carrie Underwood revenge anthem right outside your cheating husband's door? Can you imagine the look on a man's face being exposed like that? I called the resort as soon as I got to work. Locked in the women's bathroom, the one with the eternal leak and a passive-aggressive sign about flushing. "Crystal Waters Resort. How may I help you?" answered a honey-sweet voice on the other end. "I'd like to inquire about availability for this weekend," I replied, feeling my heart beating harder than drums in a marching band. I discovered Richard had booked the honeymoon suite, the second most expensive room in the hotel. "Is it possible to book the suite next door?" I asked. The attendant, Paula, hesitated. "The suite next door is the presidential. It's significantly more expensive. Significantly expensive. Just like my dignity." I looked at my savings account balance on my phone, the one reserved for emergencies, and decided that discovering your husband with another woman definitely qualified as an apocalyptic-level emergency. "I'll take it," I responded without thinking twice. 8 years of saving for a possible house down payment were about to be invested in the most expensive and possibly most satisfying revenge of my life. "And could you transfer me to the manager? I have an idea for a special surprise." Paula laughed on the other end, probably imagining a couple in love celebrating an anniversary, and not a wife about to transform a romantic weekend into a scene from a prime-time soap opera. When I hung up the phone, I stared at my reflection in the stained corporate bathroom mirror. Who was this woman, with 3-day-old dark circles and a maniacal gleam in her eyes? Certainly not the same Rebecca who cried when she broke a cup from Richard's collection. Perhaps not the same one who'd endured years of small disrespects, packaged as just how men are. I put on red lipstick, the one saved for special occasions that never happened, and fixed my hair. If I was going to play the crazy, jealous wife, at least I'd be well put together for the photos that would inevitably circulate through the building afterward. I never realized how challenging it is to pack a suitcase for a marital espionage mission. What exactly does one bring to catch a cheating husband? Black clothes for matrimonial mourning? Red to symbolize the blood you'd metaphorically like to see spilled? I spent so much time staring at my closet that Captain started looking at me with genuine concern, which is impressive, considering he frequently gets fascinated by his own tale. "It's okay, buddy," I said, scratching his floppy ears. "Mommy's just having a small nervous breakdown. Nothing major." He tilted his head as if asking, "And Daddy?" "Excellent question, Captain," I realized while folding and refolding and folding again my only decent lingerie, a Christmas gift from Jessica with a note saying, spice up that marriage blander than pasta without salt. That this would be my first solo trip in, well, forever. Richard had always handled everything on our trips. Reservations, itineraries, schedules. You already have to organize so much at work, babe. Let me take care of this. So convenient, right? Especially when the surprise destination always ended up being the same resort in the Carolinas, where he spent all day fishing with his buddies. I arrived at Crystal Waters Resort on Friday at noon, 3 hours before Richard's scheduled arrival. The place was exactly as it looked on the website. Turquoise pools worthy of Instagram filters, strategically positioned palm trees, and servers circulating with colorful drinks on silver trays. The kind of place where you post photos with the caption, "Working hard," just to make your office colleagues die of envy. Except I wasn't there to show off, but to star in what would possibly go down in history as the biggest scene ever witnessed at a 5-star establishment on the Florida coast. The receptionist, Paula, the same one from the phone call, recognized me immediately and opened a conspiratorial smile. "Miss Morgan, such a pleasure to meet you in person." She lowered her voice and leaned over the Italian marble counter. "We've prepared everything as agreed." Manager Augusto personally verified the acoustics between the suites. She handed me the presidential suite key with a wink worthy of a telenovela villain. I modified the system so the door between the suites can be opened from both sides, she whispered, as if passing me nuclear codes. Normally it only opens from the presidential side. I checked into my suite, and honestly, the place was spectacular. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, a king-sized bed that could fit 4 people comfortably, and a bathroom bigger than my entire bedroom back home. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sadness that I was experiencing this luxury as part of a revenge plot rather than an actual vacation. But then I remembered Richard booking this same romantic getaway for someone else, and the sadness transformed back into cold, calculated fury. I called Jessica as soon as I settled in. "I'm here. I actually did it. I'm really here." "Oh my God, Becca!" she practically screamed through the phone. Okay. Deep breaths. "You're a strong, independent woman about to catch her lying husband. You've got this." "Seat, what if I'm making a huge mistake?" I asked, suddenly feeling the weight of what I was about to do. "What if there's some reasonable explanation?" Jessica was quiet for a moment. "Honey, reasonable explanations don't involve secret resort bookings, dance classes, and dietary consultations for someone else. You know what you saw. Trust your gut." She was right. My gut had been screaming at me for weeks. I'd just been too afraid to listen. After hanging up with Jessica, I went down to the garden to meet with the band. Teresa had connected me with her nephew's group, a local country cover band called the Backroad Boys. When I'd called them earlier in the week to explain what I needed, there had been a long pause on the other end. "Ma'am, just to be clear," the lead singer, a guy named Jake, had said slowly, "you want us to play the same song, on repeat, for potentially hours, right outside a specific suite?" "That's correct." Another pause. "And this is for catching your cheating husband?" "Yes. We charge double for revenge gigs," he'd said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "But honestly, this sounds like the most fun we've had in months. We're in." Now, meeting them in person, I could see why Teresa had recommended them. Jake and his 3 bandmates, all wearing shirts with patterns so loud they could probably be seen from space, looked like they were ready for anything. "So you're the scorned wife," Jake said, extending his hand with an informality that made me choke on my own spit. "My Aunt Teresa told me all about you. Don't worry, we've got experience with this type of situation." The other musicians nodded, as if playing revenge music to expose cheating husbands was a specialty listed on their resumes. "The song you requested, Before He Cheats, by Carrie Underwood, it's perfect," Jake continued, adjusting his guitar strap. "We've played it at probably 100 weddings. Know it backwards and forwards. How many times you want us to run through it?" "Until I tell you to stop," I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. Jake's grin widened. "Ma'am, I think we're gonna be great friends." We went over the logistics. They'd positioned themselves in the garden area directly below the honeymoon and presidential suites. The resort's outdoor sound system, which Augusto had conveniently agreed to let them access, would amplify the music throughout that entire section of the property. "What time's the target arriving?" asked one of the other band members, a drummer named Cooper, who looked like he took this as seriously as a military operation. "Check-in is at 3. I'm guessing they'll get settled. Maybe go to dinner around 7 or 8. That's when we strike. Dinner first, then boom, musical ambush when they come back to the room." Jake nodded approvingly. "Smart. Let them get comfortable first. Makes the shock factor even better." As I walked back toward the resort, I ran into Teresa in the lobby. "Teresa, what are you doing here?" My neighbor was dressed in an elegant cream-colored pantsuit, looking like she'd just stepped out of a fashion magazine for sophisticated women over 50. She smiled sheepishly. "Okay, don't be mad, but when you told me what you were planning, I couldn't resist. I booked a room. I had to see this play out." She grabbed my hands. "Rebecca, this is the revenge I never got to have. Let me live vicariously through you, please." I should have been annoyed, but honestly, having Teresa there felt oddly comforting, like having a seasoned general on the battlefield with you. "Does Jessica know you're here?" "Called her this morning. She's driving down after work. Should be here by 6. I couldn't help but laugh. My revenge plot was turning into a group event. "Come on," Teresa said, linking her arm through mine. "Let's get a drink and go over the battle plan. And honey, you need to tell me everything about how you discovered his cheating. I want all the details." We settled at the resort bar, and I walked Teresa through the whole story. The Netflix recommendation, the nutritionist's email, the dance classes, the final discovery of the resort booking. "The dance classes," Teresa shook her head in disgust. "That's what gets me. It shows premeditation. He didn't just fall into some spontaneous affair. He was courting her, romancing her, learning to dance for her, while giving you a blender for your anniversary." "Don't remind me about the blender," I groaned. "What I don't understand," Teresa continued, taking a sip of her martini, "is how men think they can get away with this stuff in the digital age. Everything leaves a trail now. Shared streaming accounts, shared apps, credit card statements. It's like they're asking to get caught. Maybe part of him wanted to get caught." I mused. Maybe it was easier than actually having a conversation about whatever was wrong with our marriage. "Don't you dare make excuses for him," Teresa said sharply. "Whatever was wrong, he had 1,000 better options than betrayal. Couples therapy, honest conversation, even just leaving if he was that unhappy. But sneaking around, lying, spending money on another woman? That's just cowardice, dressed up as romance." I knew she was right, but there was still a small part of me, that stupid, hopeful part, that wondered if I could have done something differently, if I'd been more attentive, more exciting, more something. "Stop it," Teresa said, reading my mind. "I can see you going down that road. This is not your fault. You are not responsible for his choices." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Paula from the front desk. Your party has arrived and checked into the honeymoon suite. Thought you'd want to know." My heart started racing. This was it. This was really happening. "He's here," I told Teresa, showing her the message. She straightened up, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Then, let the games begin. I went back to my suite and changed into something more comfortable but still presentable. If I was going to confront Richard face to face, I wanted to look put together, not like I'd been crying and stress-eating for days, even though that's exactly what I'd been doing. Jessica arrived around 6:30, bursting into my room with a bottle of wine and enough emotional energy to power a small city. "I can't believe this is happening," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I mean, I can believe it because Richard is clearly an idiot, but I can't believe you're actually doing this. You, Rebecca Morgan, who cries during dog food commercials. You're about to orchestrate the revenge of the century. I might throw up, I admitted. Totally normal, Jessica assured me. But you're going to be fine. Better than fine. You're going to be legendary. The three of us, me, Jessica, and Teresa, had dinner at the resort restaurant, strategically positioned where we could see everyone coming and going. Around 7:15, Richard and Vanessa walked in. I'd never seen Vanessa in person before. She was younger than me, probably around 30, with long dark hair and the kind of effortless beauty that doesn't require 45 minutes and 3 hair products to achieve. She wore a red dress so tight it looked painted on, and she laughed at something Richard said, tossing her hair back in that practiced way that some women perfect by their 20s. Richard looked happy, genuinely, authentically happy, in a way I hadn't seen in years. He was smiling, animated, attentive. He pulled out her chair, poured her wine, leaned in close when she spoke. That bastard never pulled out my chair, Jessica muttered darkly beside me. Or mine, Teresa added. Watching them together was like being stabbed repeatedly with a very small, very sharp knife. Each laugh, each touch, each intimate glance was another cut. This wasn't just physical betrayal. This was emotional infidelity on a level I hadn't fully comprehended until seeing them together. I can't watch this, I said, standing abruptly. Let's go back to the room. Once we were safely back in the presidential suite, I let myself fall apart for exactly 5 minutes. I cried angry, frustrated tears while Jessica held me and Teresa poured more wine. Okay, I said, wiping my eyes and taking a deep breath. Okay, I'm done crying. Now I'm just mad. That's my girl, Teresa said approvingly. We waited until 9:30, giving Richard and Vanessa time to finish dinner and return to their room. Paula sent me another text. They're back in the suite. I texted Jake. It's showtime. Then I did something I'd been planning since that moment in the elevator with Teresa. I opened my photo gallery and found our wedding photo. Richard and me, 8 years ago, smiling and hopeful and naive. I looked so happy in that picture, so sure that I'd found my person, my partner for life. I attached the photo to a text message to Richard. No words, just the image. Then I pressed send, and I waited. 30 seconds after I sent the wedding photo, I heard it. The first notes of Before He Cheats exploded from the garden below, the electric guitar riff cutting through the peaceful evening air like a chainsaw through butter. Jake's voice, amplified through the resort's outdoor sound system, belted out that iconic opening verse about Louisville sluggers and headlights. I stepped onto my balcony, which was separated from the honeymoon suite's balcony by only a decorative partition. Jessica and Teresa flanked me on either side, both of them practically vibrating with anticipation. Through the thin walls, I could hear confusion, muffled voices, questioning. Then Richard's phone must have chimed, because suddenly there was silence from their suite. The kind of heavy, weighted silence that comes right before everything explodes. The music continued, relentless and perfect. The band was playing it loud enough that every guest on this side of the resort could hear it clearly. Several other balcony doors opened, curious faces peering out to see what was happening. Then Richard burst onto the honeymoon suite balcony, wearing nothing but a hotel bathrobe that he'd clearly thrown on in a panic. His hair was disheveled, his face the color of spoiled milk. He was clutching his phone in one hand, staring at the wedding photo I'd sent him with an expression of absolute horror. Our eyes met across the decorative partition. For a moment, we just stared at each other while Carrie Underwood sang about keying cars and slashing tires. The look on Richard's face was indescribable. Pure shock mixed with dawning realization, mixed with the expression of a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. If that cookie jar belonged to someone else's wife. Rebecca, he finally croaked, his voice barely audible over the music. Surprise, darling, I called out with a brightness so fake it could have been used as artificial sweetener. I saw from your search history about planning the perfect romantic getaway, and I thought you'd appreciate appropriate mood music. Vanessa appeared behind him, wrapped in a bedsheet, her perfect hair now slightly mussed. When she saw me, her face went through its own journey of emotions: confusion, recognition, horror, and finally what looked like the desire to become invisible. "Rebecca, we need to talk," Richard tried, taking a step toward the partition, as if he could somehow cross over and make this all go away. "This isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I shouted back over the music. "Because it looks like my husband of 8 years booked a romantic weekend getaway with his co-worker at a luxury resort while telling me he was going fishing with the guys. But please, enlighten me. What is it actually?" By now, at least a dozen other guests had come out onto their balconies. Some were filming on their phones. A few were laughing. One elderly woman on a balcony across the way raised her wine glass to me in a silent toast of solidarity. "Can you please turn off this music so we can talk like adults?" Richard pleaded, trying to maintain some shred of dignity while standing in a bathrobe with his mistress behind him. "Talk like adults?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You want to talk about adult behavior? Let's discuss how an adult handles marriage problems. Does an adult sneak around behind their spouse's back? Does an adult lie about fishing trips? Does an adult learn ballroom dancing with another woman while refusing to dance with his own wife at their wedding?" Richard's face somehow got even paler. He hadn't realized I knew about the dance classes. "Or how about this?" I continued, on a roll now. "Does an adult give his wife a blender for their anniversary while planning romantic getaways with someone else?" "The blender was practical," Richard muttered, which was possibly the worst thing he could have said at that moment. "Practical?" I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that has nothing to do with humor. "You know what else is practical, Richard? Honesty, communication, basic human decency. But I guess those weren't in your budget along with the honeymoon suite and champagne service." The song ended, and for a brief, blessed moment, there was silence. Then Jake and the band immediately started it again from the beginning. The guitar riff felt even more aggressive the second time around. "How long?" I asked, my voice suddenly quiet but carrying across the space between us. "How long has this been going on?" Richard opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Vanessa, then back at me. "Rebecca, Don't look at her for the answer," I snapped. "Look at me, your wife, the woman you made vows to. How long?" "6 months," he finally admitted, the words barely a whisper. 6 months, half a year. While I'd been worrying about mortgage payments and planning dinners and making sure Captain got his vet checkups, Richard had been living a completely separate life. "Did you ever love me?" The question came out before I could stop it, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "Of course I did," Richard said, and I noticed the past tense immediately. "I do. It's complicated." "No," I said firmly. "No, it's actually very simple. You made a choice. Every single day for 6 months, you chose to lie to me. You chose to betray me. You chose her." I gestured toward Vanessa, who looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. Jessica put a supportive hand on my shoulder. Teresa had her phone out, filming everything, which I probably should have stopped, but honestly couldn't bring myself to care about anymore. "I'm sorry," Richard said, and he actually looked it. "Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did it anyway," I said. "That's the thing about betrayal, Richard. Intent doesn't matter. Impact does. And the impact is that you've destroyed 8 years of my life, 8 years of trust and partnership and everything I thought we were building together." The music continued its relentless loop. By now, a small crowd had gathered in the garden below, watching the drama unfold like it was the evening's entertainment. Someone had actually brought popcorn. The resort manager, Augusto, stood near the band, making absolutely no move to shut them down, despite Richard's increasingly desperate gestures in his direction. "What do you want me to say?" Richard asked, and there was actual frustration in his voice now, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "I don't want you to say anything," I replied. "I think you've said enough, or rather, you've said nothing when it mattered. All those times you could have been honest with me, told me you were unhappy, suggested counseling, anything, but instead, you lied. So no, Richard, I don't want to hear another word from you." "Then why are you here?" he demanded, some of his own anger finally showing through. "If you don't want to talk, if you just want to humiliate me, then congratulations. Mission accomplished. Are you happy now?" I considered the question seriously. Was I happy? No. I was hurt and betrayed and angry and 1,000 other emotions that I couldn't even name. But standing there, facing him, finally saying all the things I needed to say, there was something else, too. Something that felt almost like relief. "I'm not happy," I said honestly. "But I'm also not going to be the pathetic wife who cries and begs you to stay. I'm not going to ask you to choose me, or give you another chance, or pretend this never happened. You made your choice, Richard. Now I'm making mine." "Which is what, exactly?" he asked. I smiled, and this time it was genuine. "I'm choosing me. For the first time in probably too long, I'm choosing myself." Vanessa, who'd been silent this entire time, finally spoke up. "I'm so sorry," she said, and she actually sounded sincere. "I didn't know he was married. Not at first. By the time I found out, I was already—" "Save it," I interrupted. "I don't need your apology. You're not the one who made vows to me." I turned back to Richard. "I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings. In the meantime, I suggest you enjoy the rest of your romantic weekend. God knows you paid enough for it." With that, I turned and walked back into my suite, Jessica and Teresa following behind me. We closed the balcony door, muffling the music slightly, though it was still perfectly audible. For a moment, the three of us just stood there. Then Jessica started laughing. Really laughing, the kind that comes from your belly and makes your eyes water. "Oh my God!" she gasped between laughs. "Did you see his face? Did you see it?" Teresa was grinning too. "That was the most magnificent thing I have ever witnessed. Rebecca Morgan, you are my hero." I felt the adrenaline starting to wear off, replaced by a shaky, unsteady feeling. I'd actually done it. I'd confronted Richard, said everything I needed to say, and I hadn't cried or begged or fallen apart. Well, not publicly anyway. "I need a drink," I announced. "A very large drink." "Way ahead of you," Jessica said, already pouring generous glasses of the wine she'd brought. We sat on the suite's plush couch, listening to the band launch into their 4th consecutive playthrough of the song. Through the walls, we could hear Richard and Vanessa arguing, their raised voices audible even over the music. "How long do you think before resort security makes them stop?" Jessica asked. "Oh, I paid Augusto very well to be conveniently busy for at least 2 hours, I admitted. "And I may have also mentioned that I'd be happy to write a glowing review on every travel website if they let this play out." Teresa raised her glass. "To Rebecca, for having the courage to do what I never did." "To Rebecca," Jessica echoed. "The most badass woman I know." We clinked glasses, and I took a long sip of wine, trying to process everything that had just happened. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "You're my hero. Watching from room 412. My husband cheated on me last year, and I never had the guts to confront him like that. Thank you for showing me it's possible to stand up for yourself. You're an inspiration." Then another text from a different number. "This is Paula from the front desk. Just wanted you to know that you've made my entire year. Also, your tab at the bar is on the house tonight, courtesy of management." I showed the texts to Jessica and Teresa, feeling a strange mix of embarrassment and something else. Pride, maybe? Vindication? "You're going viral," Teresa said, scrolling through her phone. "Someone posted this on TikTok, and it already has 50,000 views. The hashtag is #BeforeHeCheatsRevenge. I grabbed her phone, and sure enough, There was a video of the entire confrontation, shot from one of the other balconies. The comments were flooding in, thousands of people cheering me on, sharing their own stories of betrayal, calling Richard every name imaginable. Part of me wanted to be mortified that my marriage implosion was now internet entertainment. But another part, the part that had been silent and accommodating for too long, felt a fierce satisfaction. Richard had humiliated me in private for months. Now the whole world could see him for what he really was. The music finally stopped around midnight. Jake sent me a text. "Ma'am, we played that song 17 times. My fingers are going to fall off, but it was worth it. Hope we did you proud." I texted back, "You exceeded every expectation. Thank you." As I lay in the enormous bed later that night, Jessica snoring softly on the couch and Teresa having retreated to her own room, I finally let myself feel everything. The anger was still there, hot and sharp, but underneath it was grief for the marriage I thought I had, for the future I'd imagined, for the person I'd believed Richard to be. I cried quietly into my pillow, not wanting to wake Jessica. These weren't the desperate, panicked tears from before. These were cleansing tears, washing away the last remnants of the woman who would have accepted Richard's excuses and stayed in a broken marriage. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out the practical details. Lawyers, divorce proceedings, separating our lives. But tonight, I let myself mourn. And somewhere in the darkness, between the grief and the anger and the exhaustion, I felt the first tiny spark of something new, something that might eventually become hope. I woke up Saturday morning to the sound of aggressive knocking on my suite door. For a disoriented moment, I forgot where I was and why Jessica was sprawled on my couch wearing yesterday's clothes. Then everything came flooding back, and I groaned. The knocking continued. I threw on the hotel bathrobe and shuffled to the door, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Emotional confrontations apparently have the same effect as running a marathon while simultaneously being punched in the stomach. I opened the door to find Richard standing there, now fully dressed in jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair unwashed, and he had the general appearance of a man who'd spent the night having the worst time of his life. "Good. We need to talk," he said, without preamble. "No, we don't," I replied, starting to close the door. He put his hand against it. "Rebecca, please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, and because Jessica was stirring awake on the couch, and I didn't want this conversation to happen with an audience, I stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind me. 5 minutes, I agreed. Starting now. Richard took a deep breath, clearly having prepared a speech. "What happened last night was unacceptable. You humiliated me in front of dozens of people. You had no right." "I had no right?" I interrupted, my voice dangerously quiet. "You're seriously standing here, after spending 6 months lying to me, after bringing your mistress to a romantic resort, and you're telling me I had no right to be angry?" "I'm not saying you shouldn't be angry," Richard backtracked quickly. "I'm saying there were better ways to handle this, more mature ways. We could have discussed this privately like adults. Like how you discussed being unhappy in our marriage before starting an affair?" I shot back. "Oh wait, you didn't. You just jumped straight to betrayal. So forgive me if I'm not particularly interested in your opinions about mature communication." Richard ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "I made mistakes, okay? I know that. But Rebecca, come on. Our marriage has been dead for years. We've just been going through the motions. You can't honestly tell me you've been happy." The accusation stung because there was a kernel of truth to it. We hadn't been happy. Not really. But that didn't excuse anything. "You're right," I said, and watched surprise flash across his face. "We haven't been happy. But you know what the difference is between us, Richard? When I was unhappy, I didn't go find someone else. I tried to talk to you. I suggested date nights, couples therapy, weekend trips, and every single time you said you were too busy with work, or too tired, or we'd do it later. You checked out of our marriage emotionally long before you checked into that suite with Vanessa. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. I cut him off. And neither is marriage, apparently. Your 5 minutes are up. Wait, Richard said, as I turned to go back inside. Vanessa told me something last night. After you left, she did some digging at the office. I paused, hand on the door handle. What are you talking about? Richard looked uncomfortable. Apparently, I'm not the first person at the company to get involved with her. There were 2 other guys before me, both married, both in management positions. She has a pattern. I turned back to face him, studying his expression. Was he seriously trying to make himself the victim in this scenario? So what you're saying is, the woman you've been having an affair with for 6 months, the woman you brought here for a romantic weekend, you suddenly want me to believe she's some kind of scheming predator who seduced you? I'm not saying I'm innocent, Richard said quickly, but I think I was manipulated, used. I stared at him for a long moment, then started laughing. Really laughing. The kind that makes your stomach hurt. Oh my God! I gasped between laughs. You really can't help yourself, can you? Even now, caught red-handed, you're trying to find a way to make this not entirely your fault. Poor Richard, seduced by the evil younger woman. Give me a break. You're right, Richard said quietly, and the sudden agreement caught me off guard. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix this, I said simply. It's broken beyond repair, Richard. We're done. The marriage is over. Just like that? He asked. 8 years, and you're ready to throw it all away after one mistake? One mistake? My voice rose despite my attempts to stay calm. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. A mistake is double-booking dinner plans. What you did was make a choice. Hundreds of choices. Every single day for 6 months. You chose to lie, to deceive, to break our vows. Don't diminish what you did by calling it a mistake. Richard looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Finally, he just nodded. What happens now? Now we go home. We get lawyers. We divide our assets, file the paperwork, and move on with our lives. Separately. What about Captain? Richard asked, and I was surprised by the genuine concern in his voice. Despite everything, we both loved that ridiculous dog. We can share custody, I said. Work out a schedule. And the condo? We'll figure it out. With lawyers. I'm not discussing details with you in a hotel hallway at 8 in the morning. Richard nodded again, looking defeated. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did anyway, I said, echoing my words from the night before. And that's what matters. I went back inside, closing the door firmly behind me. Jessica was fully awake now, sitting up on the couch with her hair pointing in 17 different directions. Was that Richard? She asked. Unfortunately. What did he want? To justify himself, mostly. And to tell me that apparently Vanessa has a history of affairs with married men at the company. I sat down next to Jessica, suddenly exhausted again. Wait, seriously? Jessica's eyes widened. Oh my God, that's huge. That could mean there's a pattern of inappropriate relationships at his company. That's grounds for investigation. I hadn't thought of it that way. I'd been too focused on my own situation to consider the bigger picture. Do you think I should report it? I asked. I think, Jessica said carefully, that if there's a pattern of senior male employees having affairs with younger female employees, that's creating a toxic work environment. Whether or not you report it is up to you, but other women might be affected. My phone buzzed with a text from Teresa. Breakfast at the restaurant in 30? My treat. We need to debrief. Over breakfast, which was surprisingly delicious considering I felt like I was chewing cardboard, Teresa brought up the same point Jessica had made. You need to think about the other women involved, she said, spreading jam on her toast. If Vanessa has a pattern, and if Richard isn't the only married executive involved with subordinates, that's abuse of power. That's sexual harassment, potentially. But I don't work there, I protested. It's not really my place to report anything. Maybe not, Teresa conceded. But you have information that could help other women. Women who might be experiencing the same thing but are too afraid to come forward. I thought about it while mechanically eating my eggs. The idea of dragging this out, of getting more involved in Richard's work drama, made me want to curl up in a ball. But Teresa had a point. I'll think about it, I finally said. We checked out of the resort around noon. Richard and Vanessa had apparently left earlier, avoiding any further encounters. As I loaded my suitcase into my car, Paula came running out from the lobby. "Miss Morgan! Wait!" she called, slightly out of breath. "I wanted to give you this." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from Augusto, the resort manager. "Thank you for the most entertaining evening in my 20 years in hospitality. Your stay has been comped in full. Please consider us for any future special occasions. Wedding, perhaps?" I laughed, despite myself, and showed it to Jessica and Teresa. "See?" Teresa said triumphantly. "Even strangers recognize your greatness." The drive back home felt surreal. I kept expecting to feel more devastated, more broken. Instead, I just felt tired and strangely empty, like someone had scooped out all my emotions and left me hollow. Jessica stayed with me that first week. She'd taken time off work, telling her boss it was a family emergency, which technically it was if you counted chosen family. She made sure I ate, dragged me out for walks when I started spiraling, and patiently listened to me cry, rant, and occasionally laugh at the absurdity of it all. "You know what the worst part is?" I asked her one night while we sat on my couch eating ice cream straight from the container. "Part of me still loves him." "How stupid is that?" "It's not stupid," Jessica said gently. "You can't just turn off 8 years of feelings overnight. Love doesn't work that way. But I hate him too. I love him and hate him, and I'm angry and sad and relieved all at the same time." "Is this normal?" "Completely normal," Jessica assured me. "Grief isn't linear. Neither is healing from betrayal. You're going to feel a million different things, sometimes all at once. That's okay." See, Captain, bless him, seemed to sense something was wrong. He followed me everywhere, resting his massive head on my lap whenever I sat down, offering the kind of uncomplicated love that dogs are so good at. Richard texted a few times that first week, mostly practical things about bills and the mortgage payment. I kept my responses brief and factual. Jessica offered to be my intermediary, but I needed to do this myself, to prove I could handle the logistics of dismantling a marriage without falling apart. 2 weeks after the resort incident, I returned to work. My coworkers had clearly heard something, either through social media or through the efficient office gossip network. People looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity, but nobody asked directly what had happened. My boss, Sandra, called me into her office my first day back. I braced myself for an uncomfortable conversation about professionalism or personal issues affecting work performance. Instead, she said, "Rebecca, I wanted to let you know that a position has opened up in the analytics department. Senior analyst role, 20% salary increase, leading a small team. I'd like to recommend you for it if you're interested." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. Yes, I'm very interested. Thank you." Sandra smiled. "You've been doing excellent work for years, Rebecca. Sometimes we wait for the right moment to take our next step. Maybe this is yours." Walking out of her office, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Real, tangible hope for the future. A future that was mine alone to build. That evening, I called the Human Resources Department at Richard's company. I explained that I had information about a potential pattern of inappropriate relationships between senior management and junior employees. They listened carefully, took notes, and assured me they would investigate. I didn't know if anything would come of it, but I'd done what I could. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I interviewed for the senior analyst position and got it. My first day in the new role, I treated myself to lunch at that expensive cafe downtown that I'd always considered too pricey. I ordered the most expensive item on the menu and ate it slowly, savoring every bite. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Rebecca Morgan?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. Who's calling?" "My name is Vanessa Brooks. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I completely understand if you hang up, but I needed to tell you something." I should have hung up. I almost did, but curiosity won out. "I'm listening." "The company launched an investigation," Vanessa said, her voice shaking slightly, "into workplace relationships. They've interviewed everyone in the office, going back 5 years. Rebecca, what you did, reporting it, 3 other women have come forward. Women who were pressured into relationships with executives, who were promised promotions that never came, who were afraid to speak up because they needed their jobs." "Okay," I said slowly, not sure where this was going. "Richard's been suspended pending the investigation," Vanessa continued, "but it's bigger than just him. 2 other executives are involved, one already resigned. They're taking this seriously, Rebecca. Real changes are happening because you spoke up." I sat down on a nearby bench, processing this information. "Why are you telling me this?" Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "Because I owe you the truth. Richard lied to me, but I also made choices. I knew he was married. Not at first, but after a few weeks, I figured it out, and I kept seeing him anyway because I thought he could help my career. I'm not innocent in this, and I'm sorry for my part in hurting you." "Thank you for saying that," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "There's something else," Vanessa added. "I wasn't the only one. During our relationship, Richard was also seeing someone else, another woman from a different department. I only found out after everything blew up. The information should have devastated me. Instead, I felt oddly validated. It wasn't about me not being enough. Richard was just someone who couldn't be faithful. Period. "I appreciate you telling me," I said. After we hung up, I sat on that bench for a long time, watching people walk by, living their lives, dealing with their own dramas and joys and complications. My marriage was over. My life as I'd known it for 8 years was done. But sitting there in the afternoon sun, with a new job starting on Monday and a future that was uncertain but entirely my own, I realized something important. I was going to be okay. More than okay, eventually. But okay was a good start. 6 months after the resort incident, as I'd started calling it in my head, I stood in my new apartment. A modest 1-bedroom in a tree-lined neighborhood I'd always loved, but never thought I could afford. Turned out, living alone was cheaper than supporting a cheating husband's lifestyle. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier. It had been messy in the way divorces always are, with lawyers arguing over who got the stand mixer and whether Captain's vet bills should be split exactly 50-50 or proportionally based on custody time. In the end, I got the majority of our savings. Richard kept the condo with its mortgage, and we alternated weeks with Captain. The settlement had been more generous than I'd expected. Richard's lawyer had been eager to close things quickly, probably because the company investigation was still ongoing, and Richard didn't want any more public scrutiny. I didn't feel guilty about taking what I was owed. My new apartment had hardwood floors, large windows that let in beautiful natural light, and a small balcony where I'd started growing herbs. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, all mine. No shared mortgage, no compromises about paint colors or furniture placement. Just me and my choices. Captain was with me this week, sprawled across the living room floor in that way golden retrievers do, taking up approximately 4 times more space than should be physically possible. He'd adjusted to the new arrangement better than I'd expected, though he still looked confused sometimes when he realized Richard wasn't coming home. I understood the feeling. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Dinner at 7? That new Thai place? My treat to celebrate your 3-month work anniversary." I smiled and texted back confirmation. Jessica had been my rock through everything. The late-night phone calls when I couldn't sleep. The weekends she'd shown up with wine and terrible reality TV. The mornings she'd dragged me out of bed when all I wanted to do was hide under the covers. I didn't know how I would have survived without her. Teresa had become a regular fixture in my life, too. We had coffee every Sunday morning, and she'd introduced me to her book club, a group of smart, funny women ranging from their 40s to their 70s who read everything from literary fiction to true crime and weren't afraid to have heated debates about character motivations and plot holes. You need a community, Teresa had told me, especially now. Women supporting women isn't just a hashtag, it's survival. She'd been right, as usual. The senior analyst position had turned out to be exactly what I needed. The work was challenging enough to keep my mind occupied during those first awful months, but not so overwhelming that I couldn't handle it while processing my emotional chaos. My team was small but talented, and I'd discovered I actually enjoyed being a leader, making decisions without having to check with anyone else first. My boss, Sandra, had pulled me aside last month. "I'm impressed with what you've built here, Rebecca. You've exceeded every expectation. I want you to know that when I move up next year, I'll be recommending you for my position." Sandra's position, Director of Analytics, a title I'd fantasized about but never seriously thought I could achieve. The salary would be double what I'd been making as a regular analyst. The respect, the authority, the opportunity to shape department strategy. "I don't know what to say," I'd managed. "Say you'll think about it," Sandra had smiled. "You've earned this, Rebecca. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise." I'd gone home that night and cried. Happy tears, sad tears, overwhelmed tears, all mixed together in a confusing emotional cocktail that somehow tasted like progress. The viral video from the resort had eventually died down, as internet things do, but occasionally I still got messages from strangers, women who'd seen the video and wanted to share their own stories of betrayal and survival. A few had even thanked me for giving them the courage to leave their own bad relationships. One message had stuck with me, from a woman named Patricia. "I watched your video 3 months ago when my husband admitted to a 5-year affair. I was ready to take him back because I was terrified of being alone. But seeing you stand up for yourself, seeing you choose your own dignity over fear of the unknown, it gave me strength I didn't know I had. I left him, got my own place, started therapy. For the first time in years, I feel like myself again. Thank you for showing me it was possible." I'd read that message at least 20 times, crying every time. My worst moment, my most public humiliation, had somehow helped someone else. There was a strange beauty in that. Richard and I rarely communicated anymore except for necessary logistics about Captain. He'd been officially reprimanded by his company, but not fired. 2 other executives had been let go, and the company had implemented new mandatory training about workplace relationships and power dynamics. Vanessa had resigned and moved to a different state. She'd sent me one more message before leaving. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope someday you can find peace. You were stronger than I ever could be." I didn't respond. Some things didn't require a response. Through the investigation, I'd learned the full scope of Richard's deception. 3 different women over the course of our marriage. Not just Vanessa. The betrayal had been so much bigger than I'd known, and somehow that made it easier to let go. This wasn't about me not being enough. This was about Richard being someone who couldn't be faithful to anyone. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, whom I'd started seeing 2 months after the divorce was filed, had helped me understand this distinction. You can't fix someone else's character flaws by being a better version of yourself, she'd said during one session. His choices were about him, not about you. I was still working on believing that fully, but I was getting there. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, Teresa stood there holding a bottle of champagne and grinning like she'd won the lottery. "What's this?" I asked, laughing. "This," she announced, sweeping into my apartment, "is a celebration. I just heard through the building gossip network that Richard is moving out of the condo. Apparently, he can't afford the mortgage on his own now that his salary was cut due to his suspension." I should have felt triumphant. Maybe I would have, 6 months ago. Instead, I just felt a distant sort of sadness for who we'd both been and what we'd lost. "Teresa," I said gently, "I appreciate the thought, but I'm not really interested in celebrating Richard's failures anymore. I've moved on." Teresa studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You really have, haven't you? Moved on, I mean." "I'm trying," I said honestly. "Some days are harder than others. But yes, I think I have." She set the champagne down on my counter. "Then we'll save this for when you get that promotion Sandra's planning to give you. Deal?" "Deal," I agreed, hugging her. After Teresa left to get ready for her own evening plans, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, Captain's head resting on my feet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been too dramatic to be believable in a painting. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, the one who accepted a blender as an anniversary gift and convinced herself it was thoughtful because it was practical. The one who ignored the warning signs because acknowledging them would mean facing an uncomfortable truth. The one who defined herself primarily as someone's wife. That woman was gone. In her place was someone I was still getting to know. Someone who could live alone without feeling lonely. Someone who made decisions based on what she wanted, not what someone else expected. Someone who was learning that being single wasn't a failure or a tragedy, but an opportunity. I'd started dating again, cautiously. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and casual dinners, learning how to talk about myself, my interests, my goals, without filtering everything through the lens of a relationship. It was awkward and sometimes uncomfortable, but also exhilarating in a way I hadn't expected. Last week I'd gone on a second date with a man named Alex, a civil engineer who made me laugh and didn't seem threatened by my career ambitions. We'd talked for 3 hours over dinner, and when he'd asked if he could see me again, I'd said yes, without overthinking it. I didn't know if Alex would turn into anything serious. Maybe yes, maybe no. And for the first time in my adult life, I was okay with that uncertainty. My happiness didn't depend on being in a relationship. It depended on me, on the life I was building, on the person I was becoming. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister, whom I'd reconnected with during all of this. "Mom wants to know if you're coming for Thanksgiving. She's making your favorite pie." Thanksgiving. The holidays had always been Richard's and my thing. His family, my family. The complicated dance of splitting time and managing expectations. This year, it would just be me. And somehow, that felt liberating rather than sad. I texted back, "I'll be there. Tell Mom I'm bringing someone." "New boyfriend?" My sister responded immediately with about 17 excited emojis. "Captain," I replied, "the only man in my life who's never disappointed me." My sister sent back a laughing emoji and a heart. As darkness fell and the city lights began to twinkle, I found myself thinking about that night at the resort, the music, the confrontation, the moment I'd chosen my own dignity over the comfortable lie of my marriage. People had called it revenge, and maybe it was, but it was also something more. It was the moment I'd found my voice again, not the voice that said yes when I meant no, or sorry when I'd done nothing wrong, or it's fine when it definitely wasn't, but the voice that said this is wrong, and I deserve better, and I'm worth fighting for, even if I have to fight alone. Would I have chosen to discover Richard's betrayal? Of course not. Would I have preferred our marriage to work out? Maybe. But given the choice between staying in a relationship built on lies or starting over with truth, I'd choose truth every single time. The journey from devastation to empowerment hadn't been linear or easy. There had been setbacks, nights when I'd questioned every decision, Mornings when getting out of bed felt like climbing Everest. I'd cried more tears than I thought humanly possible. I'd felt anger so intense it scared me, and grief so deep I thought it might swallow me whole. But I'd survived it, all of it, and not just survived, but grown. Jessica often joked that I should write a book, Before He Cheats, a guide to spectacular revenge and personal growth. I always laughed it off, but sometimes I thought about all the women who'd messaged me, who'd shared their stories, who'd found strength in mine. Maybe there was something there, not about revenge, but about rediscovery, about losing yourself in a relationship and finding yourself in the aftermath, about learning that the person you become after everything falls apart can be stronger than the person you were when everything seemed perfect. My tea had gone cold. Captain had started snoring, that gentle rumbling sound that never failed to make me smile. In a few hours, I'd meet Jessica for dinner. Tomorrow, I'd tackle the new project at work. Next week, I'd see Alex again. Next month, who knew? The future was uncertain, unplanned, entirely mine to shape. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, that didn't terrify me. It excited me. I stood up, stretching, disturbing Captain, who gave me a reproachful look before settling back to sleep. Inside my apartment, I could see my reflection in the window. A woman alone, but not lonely. Divorced, but not defeated. Starting over, but not starting from scratch, because I was bringing everything I'd learned with me. If I could go back and warn that woman from a year ago what was coming, would I? Would I tell her to check the Netflix history sooner, confront Richard earlier, save herself some pain? No, because that pain, that betrayal, that spectacular public confrontation set to Carrie Underwood, had cracked me open in a way that needed to happen. It had forced me to examine not just my marriage, but myself, to ask hard questions about why I'd accepted so little for so long, to recognize my own worth instead of waiting for someone else to validate it. The resort incident hadn't destroyed me. It had freed me. And standing there on my balcony, in my apartment, living my life on my own terms, I realized something important. I'd told Richard that night that I was choosing myself for the first time in too long. But that had only been the beginning. Every day since then, I'd been making that same choice, to choose my own happiness over someone else's comfort, my own truth over convenient lies, my own growth over stagnant security. Choosing yourself isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. Some days it's easy, and some days it's the hardest thing in the world. But it's always, always worth it. I picked up my phone and opened my voice memo app, something I'd started doing in therapy as a way to process my thoughts. Note to self, I said quietly. 6 months post-divorce. You survived the worst betrayal you could imagine. You built a new life from scratch. You discovered strength you didn't know you had. You learned that endings can be beginnings, and that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's reconstruction. You're not the same person you were, and that's exactly as it should be. You're not done growing, not done healing, not done becoming. But today, right now, you're enough. More than enough. You're everything you need to be. I saved the memo and looked out at the city lights one more time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new opportunities. But tonight, I was simply grateful. Grateful for friends who'd held me up when I couldn't stand alone. Grateful for the courage to face truth, even when it hurt. Grateful for the chance to start over and get it right this time. Not for someone else, but for myself. The band had played Before He Cheats 17 times that night at the resort. 17 reminders that I deserved better. That betrayal has consequences. That sometimes the best response to being underestimated is proving exactly how strong you really are. I didn't need the music anymore. I'd learned the lesson. And as I headed inside to get ready for dinner with Jessica, Captain padding along beside me, I smiled. Not because my marriage had ended, but because my real life had finally begun. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.